anyways, there's this article by Scott Alexander called "Moldbug Sold Out." And it's about contrasting the old Curtis Yarvin with the new Curtis Yarvin, who's become something of a MAGA celebrity. Yes, these are topics I thought a lot about. I was in kind of the same internet circles as Moldbug back in the day, and the kind of disparity between what these idealistic kind of visions of society versus what Curtis is arguing for today. That's a disparity that has always kind of gotten to me. I've never been like a deep reader of Yarvin, to be honest. I have this. I know, I'm familiar with his arguments. I've read some articles. I've looked at his work. I'm familiar with the big themes, but I think he's like the polar opposite of me in how he writes and how he communicates. I Whenever somebody writes in kind of the continental style, as we might call it, I always feel like I'm being scammed. If someone writes like Garvin, I always feel like you're ever walking down the street and you somebody wants to play like a card game or something, and you just feel like they're going to snatch your wallet. I mean, I always feel that way. I always feel like someone is hiding the ball, and I don't trust the intentions behind it. And so I always feel like I'm being kind of played. When I'm reading somebody who just doesn't directly address what they're doing. I mean, I'm confident in myself that I'm not going to get scammed into believing some new thing, but it's just something about the relationship between the writer and me as the reader. It just doesn't sit right. But anyways, so Scott Alexander's basic argument is that Yarvin had this entire theory of monarchy and what his ideal non-democratic regime would look like, and it basically has nothing to do with the Trump movement. And even more so, Yarvin warned against Hitlerism or right-wing populism. And there's like 17. He lists at the end 17 things. Let's see here. Yeah, let's see. He lists. Is it 17? Well, there's something like 17 things, and that basically he says that are prerequisites for having this kind of government that Yarvin believes in, and none of them apply to MAGA, and none of them apply. Very few of them, or none of them, apply to Curtis himself. So the reactionary party always tells the truth is one thing. Yarvin is really big on truth. Um, and obviously MAGA is the polar opposite of this. It's an exclusive members only club. It's not a mass democratic movement. The MAGA movement is hyper populist. They start by appealing to smart people and is wary of including commoners. Okay, that's again 180-degree opposite. It doesn't, some of these stuff is just stupid. It doesn't use activism, journalism, or try to shape public opinion. I mean, that's that's kind of unrealistic. But anyways, MAGA does do that. It's a joint stock corporation owned by shareholders. Reactionary blogs don't attract negative attention. Anyway, this would take a while to explain this reactionary blogs this point about reactionary blogs. Okay. Anyways, and it also made me think. I read Bronze Age Mindset a while back, and I think that I kind of have insight into Yarvin and BAP. What makes these guys and what makes a lot of their followers click. And this is something that I might have I might write up as an article. I don't have time for articles because I'm working on my book. So a lot of things that should be articles maybe are going to be live streams, or they're just going to be tweets. But so the book Bronze Age Mindset basically goes. It's a very kind of like a fantasy, like, oh, we're gonna be primitive and violent and blah blah blah, but then he gives practical political advice. I think near the end of the book, and he says, "Know what is it? Know when the snake is defend. Don't be a patsy." He's telling people what to do. Okay. Um, he says, people who try to mislead you from such things, try to encourage you to talk in public about the abstractions like ethno-state, dork ideological construct like Eurasianism, anachronistic slogans like blood and soil that have never had any historical attraction to Anglos and Americans. These people are spurgs or very often federal informants or manipulated by such. By all means, study such things. Believe in them. Troll with them. Let them guide your final aims. But know what is possible in the normie political sphere. And don't become the cloud of Zog like Nealon. And so many, Paul Nealon is a guy who ran for Congress in Wisconsin. Well forgotten today, but he became kind of a crazy anti-Semite. And so many, don't become the cloud of Zog like Nealon and so many others did. If they were serious people, they would have never come in public and encourage young men to go on marches where they could be identified and tracked for life. So Bronze Age pervert, he wants these men to be Bronze Age warriors, but they should be very, very scared of being identified publicly, of having right-wing views. And then know when the snake is defending itself. Don't be a patsy. Your models must be those that have worked. Trump, Orban, the Italian movement's now ascendant, Sebastian Kurz and his party in Austria. You don't see people marching around in hotel ball boys uniforms with a solder red and talking about the Jewish question and the other kinds of role play. It's true that in the end, my aims in here and those of someone like Orban have little or nothing in common. If they were successful, all they would be able to do is reestablish the same world of sheep that existed 100 years ago, maybe inoculated against the latest degradations, but nothing very great. Still, I think it's better for the nations to be well-tended, happy sheep than to be reduced to teeming piles of starving rats. This, anyway, is my advice for those who want to get into normie politics and have a relatively normie life, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's even a great necessity. Okay, so he says basically his practical advice is become a successful advocate who wants to reduce immigration. This is all the other stuff is, you could believe in the ethno states, you could believe in Eurasianism, you could believe in whatever kind of Nazism, whatever you want, kind of underneath the surface. But the practical concern of Bronze Age pervert for anyone stepping into the political sphere is not get doxxed as a racist, and then become basically like a normie right-wing populist party, because what they could do is restrict immigration. There's nothing else. I mean, what else do Orban, Trump, Italian descendants? This is not an economic vision. This is not a vision of men and women. This is a vision where there is one issue. That issue is immigration, and that's all there is to it. So underneath Bronze Age pervert, and I saw part of this when we had the big debate, everyone on Twitter, about the H-1B visas, and I saw how just right-wing populist BAP was, and going out there and being like, oh, they're taking our jobs, this kind of scarcity zero-sum mindset. And I thought it was just very interesting because this is not consistent with a persona. Like a guy wants a spreadsheet job and he's worried about some Indian taking his spreadsheet job, right? Is that like consistent with the entire persona of Bronze Age pervert? I don't think so. And so like, it's not just low IQ immigration, it's also high skilled immigration. It's basically anyone who is not white who might come and live in a Western country. And Yarvin, so Yarvin, I think, can be understood in a similar way. Yarvin, in the end, likes the Trump movement. And why does he like the Trump movement? The Trump movement is the vehicle for white identitarianism and restrictionist immigration policies. And, there's something very interesting here. So Yarvin has an emphasis on truth. So as Scott Alexander characterizes it, he says, Moldbug's answer is complicated, not very related to our topic, but he thinks he thinks you first create the antiversity, a shadow university system laser focused on always telling the truth. Then you bootstrap it into a shadow government, which doesn't engage in violent revolution or political campaigning, but that just sits there being right about things. And then in parentheses, I'm imagining, for example, a shadow FDA that produces better drug information than the real FDA. So people gradually come to trust the shadow FDA more, even though its rulings have no legal effect. The people gradually switch their allegiance from the real government to the shadow government until finally the shadow government proposes a pseudo candidate in an election whose sole platform is switch power from the real government to the shadow government. Okay, so one of Yarvin's key ideas in how you basically build this new monarchy that's going to do away with all the remnants and all the problems of democracy, and also not devolve into Stalinism or Hitlerism, the right and left wing versions of populism, which are just mass democracy. The way you get this is just by focusing on truth. Now, what is truth? What is truth to Curtis Yarvin? What is the big truth that 2010, 2011 Curtis Yarvin is concerned with, that the establishment is suppressing? I think the same truth that the young Richard Hanania was concerned about. It's not anti-vax. It's not some kind of conspiracy theory. It's not, UFOs. It's not all these things that have become prominent in right-wing politics. It's human biodiversity. And so Yarvin's theory could be Yarvin's system of thought can be read as tell the truth. Tell the truth means tell the truth about race differences in particular. And then it's like an elaborate system of how you gain power. This is Moldbug, 2010, not Moldbug, not Yarvin today. You sit there, you tell the truth about racial differences in IQ, race and crime, demographic realities. Steve Saylor is part of this crowd. This is why there's like synergy between Saylor's sphere and Moldbug and like the alt-right and the white identitarians back in 2010, 2011. And then you seize power. But the thing that basically the establishment is lying to you about is race and immigration. Immigration is part of that because subgroups don't assimilate well. There's the concern with low-skilled immigration, particularly from Latin America, both back then and today, into the United States. And then Europe, Muslim immigration to Europe has always been something that people have been thinking about on the fringes of the right. And then why Curtis becomes a Trumpist makes sense in that context. Because Trump is the vehicle for basically immigration restrictionism, not really race realism, but might as well be race realism. I mean, Trump doesn't talk about, or his movement doesn't talk about racial differences like in IQ or anything like that, but basically wants to get rid of the interpretations of civil rights law that we've seen since the 1960s, go really hard on affirmative action, go really hard on DEI, go really hard on woke. And basically, if you understand that kind of the system that Mencius Moldbug built up was a way to mainstream a kind of white identitarianism, a way to justify it and to tell the truth as he sees it about racial differences. This is how you explain this thing. Okay, you have this fantasy about monarchy back in the day when you don't have any hope of like the Republicans being a white identitarian party. But then Trump comes along and you actually do transform the Republicans into a more explicitly white identitarian party. At that point, you're on the Trump train. You basically want the Trump dictatorship because it's going to give you what you want, which is this right wing politics on race. And so you have these two maybe most prominent thinkers on the what's called the dissident right, which I hate that term. And they're both basically constructing this kind of elaborate facade that is covering up the true motivations here, which is Orbanism, Trumpism,